Today, I want to talk to you about being careful who you let feed your brain. And what I mean by this is being very selective about who you allow to access your mind, especially when it comes to information related to self-defense, health, and personal development. Now, for those of you who might not know, I've been a professional author for over 30 years, writing books and articles on self-defense, fitness, and personal growth. So since 1989, I've been traditionally published, and by that I mean the old-fashioned way. Traditional publishing means going through the arduous process of finding a legitimate publishing company to publish and distribute your book. Essentially, you would submit a query letter to the publishing house. Now, in this letter, you'd pitch the editorial director about your proposed book. You tell them why you think it's marketable and why you think you're qualified to write about this particular subject. Along with this query letter, you would often include a sample chapter of your work and your contact information. And if the editor likes what he or she sees, you'll be one of the lucky few to get a book contract outlining the terms and conditions of your book deal. Now, in my case, I started writing for a small publishing company by the name of Paladin Press. It was a very small press of what they called the Action Library. They focused on subjects like firearms, self-defense, martial arts, survival, military and police science. You get the idea. Sadly, Paladin Press recently closed their doors. I believe it was last year. In those days of traditional publishing, the author would usually receive a 10% royalty, while the publisher would get a whopping 90%. So to put this into perspective for you, if you wrote a book and it sold for $10, you would get $1 and the publishing company would get $9. Yeah. Believe it or not, this was a standard royalty percentage in the publishing industry. And this actually reminds me of a joke. What's the difference between a pizza and an author? And the answer is, a pizza can feed a family of 4. Traditional publishing was also a slow business. It would often take up to a year for you to actually see your book in the bookstores. As I look back at those days of traditional publishing, I realized it was actually very good for me. It taught me the importance of perseverance and commitment and the value of delayed gratification. It also instilled a strong work ethic while providing me with the necessary time to work on the challenging craft of writing. I wrote for Paladin Press for about 10 years and then decided to create my own small publishing company under the name of Contemporary Fighting Arts, LLC. That way I could make a bit more money from my hard work and write and publish at a pace that was relative to my growth as both an author and teacher. But that was over 20 years ago, and now the publishing industry has gone through some radical changes. Nowadays, you don't need a publishing company to publish your book, which means that anyone can be an author. Gone are the days where editorial directors and literary agents would scrutinize your work. The publishers who function as quality control gatekeepers are long gone. As a result, there's no filtering system or standard of quality in the publishing industry. In other words, with nonfiction books, there's no way of distinguishing a qualified expert from an unqualified indie author looking to make a quick buck. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, an indie author is someone who maintains complete creative control by self-publishing his or her book through various self-publishing companies and outlets. Some indie authors will self-publish as a hobby, while others will do it strictly for the money. Indie authors will write both fiction and nonfiction, and they write about every topic under the sun. And therein lies the problem. My bone of contention is with non-fiction indie authors who write and publish subjects for which they are clearly unqualified to write about. For example, Nowadays, there are countless authors out there who write books on reality-based self-defense, and yet they have zero qualifications. In fact, if you do a bit of sleuthing, you'll discover these self-defense authors also write about real estate, picking up girls, travel destinations, and sales marketing hacks. Many of these authors have no biographies and no photo to go with it. Some of them will also write under pen names to hide their true identity. And the real true giveaway is when they publish a book that has no instructional photos, just text, because photos help verify that the author or his students have actually performed the skills and techniques that they're writing about. It becomes clear that these indie authors are not teachers or experts in the field. They're simply writing about any subject they think will sell and make money. Nothing is sacred. According to them, writing is writing. For lack of a better word, they're ghosts who are feeding your brain their idea of self-defense. To most of them, it's just another subject to write about, and they fail to realize that self-defense is a very serious and dangerous business, where a small piece of bad information can get innocent people seriously injured or possibly killed. To make matters even worse, there becomes a surplus or saturation of derivative junk self-defense books that litter the book distribution outlets. As a result, the reader and consumer will suffer because now he or she is faced with the daunting task of wading through a tremendous amount of garbage in order to find legitimate and qualified authors. Sadly, there are many other readers who don't even know the difference. Now, let me be clear. I have no problem with indie authors, especially those who write fiction. In fact, by definition, I too am an indie author and publisher. Likewise, I have no problem with dedicated self-defense and martial art experts breaking into the writing business, so long as the author is honest and transparent about who he or she is and where they get their information. When it comes to writing about real-world self-defense, where it often involves high-risk life and death encounters, indie authors have a moral obligation to be transparent with the reader and let them know exactly who they are and what qualifies them to write about a particular aspect of self-defense or personal survival. In essence, they must have the background, training, experience, and qualifications to teach others, regardless if it's a book, a video, or personal instruction. Anything less is simply going to be unacceptable. The truth is, most self-defense books published by enigmatic indie authors are derivative. So, how do they do it, you must be wondering? Where do they get their information? Well, it's actually easy. They scour the internet for free articles, or they watch YouTube videos, and then they paraphrase the material, and then they sell it as their own stuff. So, what's the takeaway from all of this? As I said earlier, there's no quality control in publishing anymore. It's now up to you to be the gatekeeper and decipher who is qualified to feed your brain. Let's say, for example, you wanted to learn how to scuba dive. Now, besides the actual physical skills and techniques of diving, you would also need to study training materials such as books and videos. So I'm going to ask you, would you read a book written by an author who has no photo, no credentials, and no experience? Of course not. Instead, you would only read and study scuba diving material from a master diver, a highly qualified person who's been there, done that, and has the certificate. The very same applies to reality-based self-defense and martial arts. You must pick authors with the same care as you would pick a surgeon who is going to perform a very difficult and risky operation. Being careful who you let feed your brain is not just limited to authors. It also applies to broader aspects of life. For example, you also need to make a greater effort to control what you watch and hear on a daily basis. For example, for years I used to watch the local and national news every day, sometimes several times per day. Little did I know that I was feeding my mind and spirit with constant negativity. If you don't believe me, watch the news for a period of time and see how often you'll hear positive and inspiring stories. I bet you won't find many. In most cases, the news, especially cable national news, will loop these negative and often hyperbolic stories 24 hours per day, or until the next negative story cycle takes its place. I actually stopped watching the news over a year ago, and it has made a huge difference in my attitude and outlook on life. In many ways, I feel less encumbered, more positive, and I have a renewed appreciation for people and the world around me. Now, for some of you who regularly watch the news for critical information related to terrorism, natural disasters, and national security, you can always follow a news outlet on something like Twitter. So if some major national crisis occurs, you'll be sure to know what's going on. But at least you won't get the constant negative overload that others experience by actually watching or listening to the news. This concept also applies to social media such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Be cautious with who and what has access to your mind. Try to avoid people and groups that are shallow, narcissistic, and mean-spirited. Avoid the temptation to engage in hostile or controversial rhetoric with others about religion, politics, or other heated social issues. Instead, seek out good-natured people who are non-judgmental and who inspire you with healthy and uplifting attitudes. Being careful who you let feed your brain also pertains to the actual people in your daily life. You need to be disciplined and selective with who you let into your personal circle. Ask yourself, are my friends healthy for me? Do they inspire me to be a better person? Do they help me make better decisions? Or are they pessimistic, unhealthy, or dysfunctional? Do they bring unwanted drama into my life? These are critical questions you need to ask yourself. You even need to go one step further and ask yourself, am I in a healthy relationship? Does my spouse or partner bring out the best or worst in me? Are they supportive, positive, and nurturing, or are they critical and judgmental? Do we work as a unified team, or are we just two estranged individuals who live under the same roof? Hopefully, with some thoughtful consideration and a bit of soul searching, you'll recognize these red flags and make the necessary changes to improve your life and help you reach your highest potential. Finally, I'd like you to try and look at all the people who come into your life as indie authors. Yes, indie authors. Some are good and some are bad. In the end, it's up to you to be the gatekeeper and decide who you will allow to contribute and help write the book of your life. This has been The Truth with Sammy Franco. Please help spread the word and let other like-minded people know about this podcast. And if you'd like to learn more about me, please feel free to visit my website at sammyfranco.com, or you can always follow me on Twitter at @RealSammyFranco. Again, thanks for listening. Until next time, take care.